find love.
He's in a position where people look to him for guidance. Like, if he doesn't know, like, how are any of the rest of us going to figure it out? So yeah, there's great humility in that moment. I want to talk about the music in the sex scene, and we'll talk about the sex scene, I promise. It's important. And but the score really swells in that. It dips in and out throughout the film. It's playful, it tinkles, it's here and there. But in the sex scene, it's big and it's all-encompassing. So how did you figure the music out for that section?
I wanted to do something almost Wagnerian. There's something really... look. Hey.
Hola, nuestro amigo está aquí. This is the wonderful Sebastian Lelio.
Sorry, I'm from Latin America. We're always a bit late.
So happy to see you. Thank you for coming. We were talking about the music during the sex scene. We can just jump into the sex scene if you want, since we're there.
Did I miss something?
We're talking about the music and how it's bigger in that moment. But I understand that in the script it was just a few words. And I'm wondering, how did you make it so full, emotionally erotic without being explicit? How did you plan it all out? Take a breath.
The first question.
You have water. Also, you have water there if you want it.
No,
Take a breath.
fine,
Okay,
I always knew that was somehow the heart of the film, and I knew it had to be long in terms of duration, and it had to be about their feelings, and so I had it developed in my mind a few moments, and then probably like 4 weeks before shooting, I storyboarded the scene. I always storyboard my films. I tried to make them as beautiful as possible, but I couldn't because I draw very badly. But then I showed them so to say, the stations, because it's like episodic, you know, they start leaning against the table, then this and that, and the Rachels, the two Rachels really got it. I mean, they were. It didn't take long for them to, you know, be on board with the idea, and because it's all about the out of frame. What's out of frame, so it's focusing on the faces, and then we are all, you know, completing the blanks, and it's about duration. So I knew that piece needed to be, you know, 4 minutes long, or so we can really spend time with them in that moment when they are probably the most naked and maybe real, you know, all the masks fall down.
Yeah, they're clothed, like they are not physically naked, but when Monique takes off Este's wig, it is so erotic, and it's such a moment of vulnerability for them both, I think.
And when we were doing the music, one of the things that Sebastian talked about was Este's voice being like the soloist, almost like an operatic sense of like her moans and her voice. Maybe you talk about that more eloquently than me, so you should.
What did I say?
Well, just about her voice and wanting to hear Este's voice.
Oh yes. Yeah, because, you know, in this culture, it's so verbal that the human voice has a very particular function, which is to transmit the message, and I found that it was like so, in that context, so subversive to listen to the human voice being used for something so unproductive as pleasure, you know. So it's nice because you have the Jewish choir, the rabbi at the beginning telling the speech, the colloquial conversations, and then the human voice during when it's exposed to pleasure, and it's like another function of language somehow. Yeah.
When Esti kisses Roni that first time, like a little cry comes out of Roni, and it's like pure and from deep within her. So I see what you're talking about with that. So Rachel Weisz brought this project to you, correct? What about it appealed to you immediately?
Rachel Weisz.
Say no more.
No, and the fact that I loved the sound of the story. I mean, one of the producers, Ferida Torres Blanco, she pitched the story to me, and I loved the way it sounded. The triangle, this very particular triangle, and vibrating human beings making mistakes, and in front of a backdrop of pretty much solid ideas and conceptions of the world. So that I thought was an opportunity to create volume and tension. So it sounded, I don't know why, because I'm not British or Jewish, but you never know. But I grew up in a very Catholic country, and in my childhood I grew up in a Catholic country during the dictatorship. I'm not saying that this is a dictatorship, of course, that's not at all the point, but it sounded strangely familiar.
And they had lunch with you, the two stars here. I understand they had a lunch with you early on, and that you knew pretty quickly that they had amazing chemistry with each other. What was that like?
It was nice because I mean I really advocated for Rachel McAdams. I thought she was perfect for this, and then, but we had to sit down and see what, how they felt and how we all felt with each other, and yeah, when I saw them physically there in the same time space, it was clear to me that it was going to work. I was like really excited and because they are very different in a certain way, but there's something similar at the same time. They are not. It's like I was always playing with this idea of the one being the inverse of the other, like the cards when you have the queen looking up and looking down. So one like the two dimensions of the same woman. One escaped and lost her origins, and one stayed and repressed herself.
I did that bit already.
And it sounded really great then too.
You used that one. But I didn't do the card thing. I hadn't heard that.
It's a good metaphor. It works. So I understand that you spent quite a bit of time, of course, because it's clear from watching the film, researching the Orthodox community. The very, very few films that we see about Orthodox Judaism take place probably in Brooklyn. Menashe, which came out last year. There are not a lot of films covering this topic. What did you want to convey about it, and what surprised you the more you learned?
I thought it was a huge challenge to to make a film and try to overcome a certain natural resistance that the secular spectator can or could have with the idea of orthodoxy. I think orthodoxy in general doesn't have good press, and I was I thought it was a good challenge, an interesting challenge to see beyond the prejudices and try to capture whatever is human and try to concentrate in the aspects that we have in common. I think every society has its lights and shadows, and just like any individual. But to make an Orthodox community story appealing and sensual was like a major challenge. And then it was important to discover that they are not the antagonist. but antagonism comes from the characters themselves. So they are their own obstacle to overcome whatever they are going through. So it was probably, it would have been too easy to make the community the villains, or David the villain, you know. So the question was, what if, you know, the antagonistic forces are within each character, and that was a way of hopefully escaping the trap of creating an unfair portrait.
Matthew and I touched on this a little bit before you got here. Just I so appreciated that, yeah, David is not the bad guy. There is no bad guy. And it would be easy to say, to point a finger like, oh, they can't be together because of this or that. And it's so rich and it's so complicated. And Alessandro Nivola is as amazing in this as Rachel Weisz, as Rachel McAdams. And that threesome there, the three of them, is really powerful. There's a question in there somewhere. Could you expound upon that?
Yeah. I agree with you.
Let's move on. You have an Oscar now.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Where do you keep it?
We do, because Matthew did the music.
Oh, there you go. You both have Oscars.
As well.
Okay. Where does the Oscar live?
He is now in Chile, where I am for a few months. Mm-hmm. Somewhere on the left side of my desk.
Okay. And Gloria and A Fantastic Woman and Disobedience, they're interested in women who are finding their voice and finding their identity, and specifically their femininity within certain constructs. What about that idea appeals to you?
I like them. I mean, yeah, Gloria was very instinctive. The first version of Gloria, because I'm making a new version.
I want to talk about that too.
Was coming from a very organic place. I mean, most probably mainly from my mother and my mother's friends, and that generation of women drinking, you know, sharing a drink together, and me sitting down with them and listening to their stories, which I always found funny, terrible, heroic, and invisible. You know, they were going through a process of invisibility. So it was like, there is a film there. And then making that film somehow maybe opened a door. And then I just got it really connected with this idea of taking these female characters that are somehow outside the usual narratives or on the fringes of society, and put them at the absolute center and try to create these complex portraits of them, and see them fall and see them standing up at the end and hopefully prevail. And I would say it's the same case with this film, even though this is a triangular story. I mean, it's the two women and David. But whatever is feminine in David is really interesting as well, because I mean, one layer is to say that you're interested in female characters, and maybe a deeper layer is to say that you're interested in femininity as something that is somehow cornered today, you know, even within men.
And it's rare. There are definitely not enough rich characters like this that we saw today, you know, in film. So I definitely appreciate that. And you are revisiting Gloria with Julianne Moore. So yeah, so we'll talk about that one eventually too. So where are we with that project right now? What's the status of that?
We are getting close to a final cut. Yeah. So starting to post-produce that film quite soon.
What made you want to revisit that story from a different angle?
Julianne Moore.
What was that conversation like when you first approached her?
She really loved the film, and I wasn't. It was like I had been offered to do it before, to remake my own film, and I wasn't interested. But then, after talking to her, I changed my mind, but it was before shooting A Fantastic Woman and Disobedience. So our conversation ended up, with the deal that we were going to wait for me to do these two films, especially a first film in English, and then we would do this new version of Gloria, and we had a great time.
Were there things about your original film that you now had the opportunity to go back and tweak a little bit or explore a little more?
Yeah, some corrections, some things that didn't work, and I understood why while editing the first one, which has to do with the amount of understanding that you have of the character. So knowing that, I think this time it was possible to go a bit farther and to be more free, because you already know so much about what makes that story work. So it's the same story, but it's a different actress, it's a different context, and it's a different moment. Suddenly the story of a 50-something years old woman that wants to keep dancing, for as simple as it might sound, is suddenly urgent and even political.
Well, I can't wait to see that. I think we have to get out of here soon, don't we? Do we not? What time is it? We have to go, I think. Do you want to take any questions? How about we do 2 questions? Because we have to get out of here really soon, I think. Right here in front of us, please.
Sure. Do you want to repeat the question?
Yes. Use of sound and silence in cutting to create moments. I'm paraphrasing.
There's a definition of music which is the organising the gaps. It's just the organisation of the rests and the spaces in between. I think there's something to do with just staying out of the way and being very clear about what the function of the sound and the music is. And there's one of the best things that Sebastian said in Fantastic Woman was actually the music is there to hold our hand, and in that particular film at that particular point it's there to hold our hand and tell it it's okay, we're in control, we come with us, trust us. And as banal as a point as that is, that's actually a lot more honest than many other directors I work with. So many times directors say to you, I want to use music differently, I don't want to do this, I don't want a John Williams score, I don't want any of this, and then fast forward 3 months, can you do more like that John Williams stuff? And I even met a director. I worked on a film where the director said, one thing I don't want is I don't want a soundtrack by Gabriel Yared. Don't do that. And then obviously fast forward 3 months, music by Gabriel Yared on the film. But it's something to do with this. It's something to do with the idea of a soloist somehow for me. And so, Fantastic Woman, you have a soloist. And you're there, you're the orchestra to support the soloist, and in Disobedience it's the story where the story is the soloist, and you're there to, because it's a horrible feeling when you notice music and you notice you're being manipulated, but there's other times when it's cathartic. One of the things you probably wouldn't have noticed on first watch, but the music doesn't resolve there's no resolution in the music until the three of them hug. So actually you've got a suspension. Even in the sex scene, the music tonically, part of it resolves, but there's still an unresolved part at the top of it. So actually you've got a question mark, a musical question mark that lasts nearly 2 hours, and then it resolves when the three of them hug. So there's little ways that you're just trying to support the story, really. It doesn't quite answer your question, but we're short on time, so.
That was an amazing answer. One last one, we gotta go. Yes? The question is, explain the ending.
Well, it ends where it ends, and we don't know. I mean, we can guess. One way of looking at it is, what do we know about them? And I guess we know that they are, from their particular angles and perspectives, they are a step closer to themselves. And maybe Ronit will stay in touch with Esti. I don't think Esti will go to New York. I don't know.
There's a really, whilst we were making it as well, there's something that I didn't clock, even though I'd seen it a couple of times, which is actually nobody else knows that they went to the hotel and had sex. Actually, David doesn't know. Nobody else knows. So only they know as well. So there's a real private